He was a childish man, and he was confiding, and he nearly always told the truth. Another feature of his character was that he was generally pursuing some theory or other, often dealing with archaeology or biology or history. This is how T.H. White writes about himself when he figures as a character in one of his own books, The Elephant and the Kangaroo. White's best-known work is The Sword in the Stone, which tells in agreeably anachronistic terms of the education of the young Arthur by the magician Merlin. Merlin, a testy old patriarch fond of practical jokes, seems to have been compounded in equal parts of Aristotle, Kipling and Tommy Handley. An artist working up a picture of Merlin from the hints provided might turn out a very passable likeness of White himself. Once White lived in a forest. Now he lives on an island. But if he is on the run from the world has caught him up with a vengeance. I asked him what it felt like to find Lerner and Lowe on his removed doorstep. I asked him how it felt with the brass of Broadway already sounding in his ear.
Well, I suppose anything that happens to you is real. One's life is a series of things that happen, and you've got to get accustomed to them. Being mixed up with Broadway, I shan't be mixed up with it. I'm not interfering with Lerner and Lowe. Some people say, are you doing anything about what they're doing? Well, now, if you're being painted by an artist, you let him paint you, and you don't lean over his shoulder all the time saying, I don't squint as much as that. And I'm not interfering with Lerner and Lowe, and let them get on with it.
But do you think they're going to interfere with you?
No, I don't. Well, I don't mind if they do. If they think I squint, let them say so.
Will they try and fetch you over there?
I wouldn't mind going, just for a lark.
Dr. Johnson said that the high tide of human life was to be found at Charing Cross, may even be a bit higher in these days. Do you not care for the high tide of life?
Well, I think Dr. Johnson was a darling, but I think he was talking rot. The high tide of life, of anybody's life, is where that person is. You take your world with you. I don't see what the advantage of being in Charing Cross is. Would it make any difference to Othello or Macbeth whether he was in Dunsinane or Charing Cross? He's got his self with him wherever he is.
Your books are full of descriptions of techniques, how to dismember the head of a rabbit in order to feed the brains to a goshawk, amongst many others. Can you do the things you describe?
Yes, you've got to do everything you write about, every bloody thing. You've got to be able to fly an aeroplane and ride a horse and shoot a bow and arrow and wear a suit of armor. And if I say, as I do say, that being dressed up as a suit of armor is like being a deep-sea diver, you've got to go and be a deep-sea diver, which I did. You can't write about life unless you live it. You can't properly describe how a thing is done unless you can do it. You've got to do everything there is. Everything.
Is he a don out of his cloister? Is he a schoolmaster gone native? White has always lived away from cities. He likes Alderney because, as he says, he can cross the road without his dog being run over. White bought a house on the island and made it into the sort of house he wanted to live in. He filled it with the books, the many books he needed. He filled it with the sort of impedimenta that pleased him. On the walls of his house and on the walls of the studio in the garden hang his own pictures. Writing, says White, is his profession. Painting is his pleasure. He said he'd rather be a painter than a writer, but he said he was not good enough. White spends his time mastering techniques, getting crazies. He has dug a swimming pool that looks like a pit for gladiators. He has constructed and equipped a sound studio where he records commentaries for films he makes about puffins. He is currently creating a temple to Hadrian. He is, on his own admission, busily occupied keeping his eye on the universe. If he removes his attention for a moment, the whole lot caves in. Indeed, he might well be Merlin, come back out of Avalon in blue dungarees, his specs slung about his neck to teach us all. The wise man, a sort of sage, a sort of patriarch, crops up a lot in your books. I'm thinking of the Professor in Mistress Masham's Repose and Merlin in The Sword and the Stone. Why?
Well, I suppose he's me. But it's quite true that they do come, or there's always some sort of sage who represents this thing of loving people, knowing things, finding out and verifying your facts.
But you said that you thought that the wise man in your books was in fact yourself. Well, you look rather like a sage, and you actually feel you are one. I mean, you have the patriarchal look, almost as if you're cultivating it.
Well, I'm not cultivating anything. If I am a sage, I am a sage, and if I'm not, I'm not, and I can't help it.
What makes you think you are one?
I don't think I am one. I don't think about myself very much. I don't know what I am.
But you said you supposed the wise man in your books was you.
Well, because you brought him up. It is a fact that they are there, and that mostly they express my opinions. I believe in education, you see.
Very few serious writers manage to survive on their writing alone. How do you manage?
By luck. You can write as well as you possibly can and die in a garret to please the public, because the only good artist is a dead artist. But if you have the kind of fortune which wins the pools, 1 in 1,000 or 1,000,000 happens to get away with it. And it is exactly the same as winning the pools. It's not because I write well or anything.
How did you win the pools in your way?
Well, I happened to write a book which I enjoyed writing, and I had £100 in the world, and this book was then the book of the month.
Which book?
It was called The Sword and the Stone. And then I spent all that money, or gave it to the income tax people, and got poorer and poorer again, and then sat down and wrote another book, feeling very poor but happy, and this was again the book of the month.
Which one was that?
This was Mistress Masham's Repose. This then carried me on till about 2 years ago, and again I was on my uppers and sort of mending my socks as well as I could, and I knew what had happened. In fact, I wrote it in the Who's Who in America or something, saying, well, I'm certain to get either the Nobel Prize or something or other, because I'm very poor, and it's about time something happened. Whereupon Lerner and Lowe turned up and said, we want to make a musical. It's luck.
Do you like making money? Do you enjoy it? Is it important to you?
No, not a bit. No.
Do you make a lot of money?
No. I make a great deal and then hand it all over to the farewell state. But even if I was a millionaire, I should go on living as I do. You are you.
You live very sumptuously there.
I do not. I do my own cooking and everything.
You've got a whacking big swimming pool and a temple to Hadrian.
The swimming pool is to swim in, and the temple to Hadrian is because I think Hadrian was a very fine fellow. But it is not in order to be rich and have one. It's because I can just afford to do it by scraping up what little is left to me by you people in the smoke.
Does success mean critical success for you? Do you regard critics highly? Do you have to have their approval?
I pay a lot of attention to them, and I listen to what they say, and I try to think about it.
Any of them ever got on the wrong side of you?
Yes. Some cursed fellow, thousands of years ago, invented the word whimsy about me. And they will say I'm whimsical. It's something to do with Lewis Carroll or something of that sort. And I'm not whimsical. I'm a most serious, hard-working man. And to be told, oh dear, dear, when I was young, there was, the fashion then was you had to be grown up, you mustn't be whimsical, and you hadn't to be an escapist, and all kinds of things that were unfashionable. And any stick to beat a horse with, or a donkey or whatever, they decided I was whimsical.
Why did they decide it, do you think?
I don't know. It was just some way of insulting you. And that it was fighting
What, do you
talk.
think
It was
just
fighting talk, you see, to be an escapist or whatever.
Do you think it was sheer malice?
Yes, it was just something to be unpleasant about. And I'm the most serious, unwhimsical, hard-working, scholarly, learned, serious writer. And they will say I'm whimsical, and they will make me write the same book again and again and again. I think it's something to do with Lewis Carroll.
Do you think you have anything in common with Lewis Carroll? Some of your books could be described as fairy tales. If I may put it this way, I don't think you write for children, but you write in order to include children, to include them in your audience.
Well, I think children are about 10 times more intelligent than grown-ups. They're more alive, they're more perceptive, they're doing more, they're more vigorous and more vivid, and more able to distinguish between right and wrong. And I don't write for anybody in particular. I write for myself, I suppose. And if I'm childish, I'm very glad I am.
You've written about the 18th century, and you've written about the Victorian time, and you've written, most importantly, about the Arthurian legend and the Arthurian time. Now, it seems to me that the class structures and social setups in these times have got a lot in common. I wonder if you're a propagandist for this sort of society.
I am me, and I'm the product of my environment and my heredity, and I'm not a propagandist for anything except what I was brought up to believe in and do.
And what was that?
Well, you see, I'm a middle-class Edwardian Englishman.
Why are you writing about Arthur in your most
Because my
book?
grandfather was a judge, a very upright, just, good old man, who believed in right and wrong, and he had these standards of value which King Arthur and Victoria and good people have.
You spoke of the standards of these pastimes. I wonder, will you define what they are?
Good gracious. Knowledge and being affectionate and decent and courageous and knowing about things and having a moral sense of your duty towards your neighbour and yourself.
Does affection cover love?
Yes. The older you get, the more you're affectionate and less loving, and the more important the other sides of love. I mean, instead of this boy meets girl job, which I think is the end.
But it's the beginning.
Well, yes, but I'm over the beginning. All this stuff that everybody writes, 10 million writers all scribbling away about there they go away into the sunset, arm in arm and interlaced and so on, is so overdone by everybody.
So badly done.
And badly done. Great writers like Graham Greene and Sylvia Warner write about other subjects, really. Even if boys and girls are involved in it, the book comes down to be a book about ambition or jealousy or reliability or...
But surely only jealousy in relation to love is a sort of weak aspect of the loving of that particular person.
Well, what about love? I'd rather like to write a book about parents and their love and the trouble. Can you trust yourself to let your son grow up as himself? Or will you make him into you, copy of you? And about mother-in-laws, which are considered a joke. You love your daughter for 18 years, then you've got to hand her over to somebody else and be told to go away because you're a bore. And are you brave enough and good enough to do that? That kind of thing. The problems of behaving decently as a human being aren't all involved with close-up hugs like the cinema.
You've told me what you write about. How do you actually set about it?
It depends on the book. It depends on how it happens. Well, I'm going to say practical things. I wrote a book called The Master, which I've been thinking about for 10, 15 years, and that got written in 3 weeks by getting up at 8 in the morning and sitting down in that sofa and writing till 8 at night. And it just came out in 3 weeks. Another book might take 15 years. Let me say one thing. If you've got the guts to write a book and finish doing these 70,000 words, it's almost certain to be published by somebody. You see, everybody in the world thinks they can write a book, and they get to page 4 and count the words and say, oh dear, it entails some work, and then they stop. Well, anybody who can go on and do it, you'll get it published, and it'll probably pay for itself.
If there is one thing that's essential to a man writing well, what would it be?
Being well, I think, and being sane. And then when I think that, I always ask myself, what about Proust? And what about, well, there are writers who are absolute swine in their private life, and yet they write very well. So I don't know. I say, for me, I've got to be feeling well and sensible, healthy. Otherwise, my judgment on any subject is not going to be warped or sickly. And it's very hard work feeling well.
How do you set about it?
Well, just like, who's that man who runs about at 4 miles an hour or does a mile in 4 minutes, whatever it is? You've got to be absolutely in physical training. And if I had to write my occupation on my passport, I should put down manual labourer.
I'm not very clear what you mean by training.
I swim about under the water looking at fish, permanently, all the time, and I clamber up rocks and chase birds about. I'm getting old. I think for an old man, I'm very active.
How old are you?
53. I won't often have a fight with you, but...
You'd certainly win.
Yes, I should lie down at once.
Tell me, do you feel you belong to a specific literary tradition?
Yes.
And what is it?
The tradition of English literature, which is to say that people take pains and work and think and try to do and try to behave in print as well as in their lives. And they don't say a moo is a boo is a coo like Gertrude Stein.
Yeah,
they don't believe that the best painter is a baboon. And they don't believe that the best music is made by beating on a tin drum, a child's tin drum.
I don't think anyone who isn't an idiot thinks that.
But this is what we're getting. We're all trying to clamber back into the womb. We're so scared with our atomic bombs and everything that all the artists now are trying to behave as if they were back in the nursery, putting their head back into the, the playpen.
I don't think you're right, but I wonder what writers of the past you feel you belong to?
Well, everybody who's ever written before me. Who's ever tried and written as well as he could.
But couldn't you narrow it down a bit?
My favourite writers?
I suppose that's what it comes to.
Well, it comes out just in a very normal way, Shakespeare and so on. Of course, naturally, I don't mean I'm anything like Shakespeare, but I mean that the influence of great and good men is the influence I try to be in.
Do you feel you're in the mainstream of current literary development?
No, I'm not a bar.
What's a bar?
Well, I'm not one of these people who believes in getting monkeys to paint pictures for them.
Well, they're not in the mainstream of contemporary literature.
Aren't they? Well, to go back to the mainstream of contemporary literature, I'm not an angry young man, I'm an angry old man. I'm not angry because it's no good being angry unless you've got some way of replacing things. I mean, it's no good just saying, I condemn so-and-so, unless you know what you would suggest to do.
Well, if you're not in the mainstream, you're in a bywater. Does this bother you?
Contemporary bywater doesn't bother me a bit, because I think that contemporary people are the end.
But being in a bywater, do you think you're going to have any influence?
I'm in the mainstream. I'm in the mainstream. They're in the bywater.
But it's your own mainstream. No one else is in it.
Yes, I am. I'm in the mainstream, Sir Thomas Malory. I'm going on writing about the matter of Britain, which people have been writing about for 1,000 years. And
they haven't been writing about it for 1,000 years.
Indeed they have.
Until you came along.
Well, yes, everybody's been writing about it all the time. Milton nearly wrote about it.
Not quite.
Well, he said he was going to write about Arthur, and then suddenly he thought he'd write about Adam instead. And Tennyson and Malory and all the lot. I don't go rushing about saying I'm angry, and...
You are a bit, aren't you?
Not really.
Well, you're angry with all the rest of us.
No. You amuse me. And I just plod along. You'll come back, you see.
You think that you are right and the rest are wrong?
Certainly, always,
I see.
Yes.
Does White mean all he says? Probably not, for in the face of the modern world, his inclination is to tease. The whole truth is in his books, for there, as he says himself, he is hoping to qualify for the big leagues. He is hoping to qualify for posterity.